I would like to have this short conversation as a preparation for our Soul Week in Hungary, where we have several different spaces designed for personal or system transformation. And this time I would like to have the conversation with you, Guus Geisen, whom I have known for 20 years, almost, yes. I think. It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
And I know that both of us have walked a long path already before that and since then. And as an introduction, I know the very, very exciting passion of education, organizational learning combined into learning schools, and how actually your approach of learning schools, systemic understanding, moved out of the schools also into companies, working with organizations as well a little bit. And it would be wonderful if you could share your experiences, your inner passion, what really originally brought you in this direction. Maybe a few words about your past, which I know, but it would be more authentic if you linked it together, so that we can see how beautifully the world at the moment seems to weave together different sectors of society into into wanting to develop wholeness in our personal experiences, whereas times before, somehow the early child who was already having a sense of wholeness was moving away from the wholeness, thanks to industrial-based education and societal differentiations. And I love it, how it comes together nowadays. So the piece is yours.
Yes, thank you. And beautifully that you give me the opportunity to think about this and use this also again as a way to deepen my learning. And that for me is always the essence of what I have been doing. I have been starting my professional life as a teacher and in special education because I thought regular education is too much of a path that is already designed towards a certain goal. For me, children who have a special need are the pathway next to the regular path. So there for me is the essence of it's unpredictable. You don't know what is going to happen. There is something that is needed for this child or these children. And that's what always triggered me. And I am in my professional life, I learned more about this and why this roadmap of me has been developing as it did. So I always search for ways how to do something differently than the path that is most regular. So working with the children, I always search for different things, other opportunities to connect to learning. And so I understood after several years that we need to change this educational system. So I became a principal in special education. I started working on a regional basis and did this for 8 years. And then I noticed if you want to change the system, I need to do something different. And I became a consultant in educational change. So for me, there is a roadmap towards change every period of time, deepening into a new situation, and then learning, and then discover that the world is a bit bigger every time I make a choice. So one of the most important experiences from a theoretical perspective was reading Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, and then how wonderful it was that it was developed into learning schools, the fifth discipline, and schools that learn. And for me, the introduction in the first chapter of the book about the perspective of industrial age thinking and the connection to a more living system perspective of organizing was an incredible eye-opener. That was, for me, an amazing paradigm shift. And from there...
Can I just jump in here? Because I think this is exactly where the paradigm shift comes in, that you, at the beginning of what you said that the unpredictability, you mentioned, you did say this word. And I think this is one of the key words which connects us in the paradigm shift. Yes. And for me, it was when I got into the dialogue project at MIT, and with the David Bohm dialogue, experimenting with that, all of a sudden, there was a whole new world also opening, that actually we can be here and now fully with our full capacity, while we do not want to control and forecast the future according to our mindset, but develop a different other kind of capability. It's interesting that it came first in the business world on a more larger scale.
Yeah.
And this realization which led you to the education, that actually in order to develop this capacity in us, human beings, it's just as well important that we start in education, so that we do not want, and then I give it back to another Dutch person in the soul community, Arie de Geus.
Yes.
So Guus Geisen and Arie de Geus, just to use the connection with the two words.
Yeah.
When he always said that the difficulty was for a long time that we were teaching and educating people answers which were given to the questions which were raised and inspired by the problems of the day before yesterday. Mm-hmm. And your approach with this openness of the unpredictability has a completely different, and the whole organizational learning approach, a whole completely different new avenue.
Yes, and there is this develops more into deeper insights. So we have designed the educational system based on industrial age thinking and the predictability of results.
Absolutely.
And every living system is unpredictable. So this is a roadmap, a design that has been working for a long time, but it's impossible to use it in this 21st century. And we need to have a different design, but it's not in the way of we have this axe of unpredictable, predictable systems, a living system, machine age system. It's now time that we interconnect both. And that for me is the essence of being a system thinker. I notice that the world is developing more and more into a polarization.
Mm-hmm.
So
because of the change which is happening.
Yes. It's more and more polarization, and it really needs to be interconnected. So how can I design an educational system that is based on learning from the perspective of a living system, and everything is unpredictable, in a way that is a bit more designed from being predictable in we have this learning lines from the beginning until the end. Math, you have to start from a beginning and not start from the end. So there is an interconnection needed. And for me, that's the challenge. The organizational learning perspective and several other theories have been developed from organizational perspective, from business. And what I do is, what is interesting to me, like Frederic Laloux's Reinventing Organizations.
Yes.
That's also based on organizations. Then I study it, I transfer it to education, see how I can use it in the work with children. If I can use it in the work with children, then it's a theory that is really meaningful. And then I start working with it with the children connected to organizations. So for me, what I noticed that my unconscious desire was to base my learning based on unpredictable processes and interconnection, systemic interconnection. So I always try to interconnect everything. I don't want to exclude anything. For me, that's the essence of an ecological living system. And that's why I work with children and companies, because I notice that there needs to be an interconnectedness. But there's another even more important perspective why I work with young people and adults, is that for me, there is too little awareness that we can learn from children.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes, even
adults,
just to butt in here, even those who do think of themselves as new paradigm thinkers,
yes,
sometimes tend to think of the other, whoever the other is,
yeah,
and mostly with children, as empty vessels.
yes,
Need to be filled in with this fantastic new insight of my new paradigms.
yes.
And that's where actually all of a sudden you realize that at the depth of their operation, which we would call the mental models, the deep radical change has not taken place yet.
Yes. And this is also because we understand a bit more about how learning takes place. So we have this genetic perspective that learning is very slow and it goes in centuries and it goes in generations. But there's a new insight, and it's about epigenetic processes. And for me, that shows that the young children, they sense their environment and they already in their whole system adjust to the new environment that is occurring, that is developing around them. So for us adults, we are never in the capacity to develop the way that the adults of the future can develop. It's impossible anymore. And in that perspective, we as experienced adults could be more open to the epigenetic capacities of children, how they could develop. And so for me, there is the essence of acceleration in learning. Every learning is slow. It's based on delay. If I want to incorporate something, that it needs exercise, it needs practice, it needs time, it needs attention. But when I learn from somebody else, I see how they develop something, they act something, and then I can...
The delay is very short sometimes.
Yes,
actually,
and I can accelerate
which is
my
amazing.
learning.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So there could be the beautiful, and then I get back to the interconnectedness of, from a systemic perspective, we could learn from children, children could learn from us, but that is from a more respectful, equal perspective.
What comes into my mind is my childhood experience actually in the grammar school. I had a fantastic English teacher. Maybe thanks to her, my whole life was equipped with this love for English at the beginning, and then I became a teacher as well, and then moving into the English language cultures, etc., etc. But what comes into my mind is that when we loved her teaching, she always, and she just passed away last year, and I told her just in her deathbed that, Marta, I really learned something essential from you, which was, in spite of the fact of me loving the speech, you know, I can produced. But actually, she already offered the situational learning opportunities for us. And she always said, I'm not a teacher, I'm just a walking dictionary.
Yeah.
And by basically 40 years later, nowadays, with the help of mobiles, internet, and the environment for children, actually they look at the whole world as a walking dictionary, you know, or encyclopedia, which they can use very easily and freely to choose what is important for them in the here and now for what they want to do. So it's more important to help them to understand this systemic world, to tune into how to inspire themselves in order to carry out something which they usually have in their mind, any kind of project. And that, I think, is essential to keep them going in a world which is unpredictable, as you say.
And for me now, there is a key element that is missing in the educational system, that is value-based learning. So the need for shared values for what we think as a species, what is important.
So in a sense, why we are here and what's our role in the world as a species.
Yes, the fundamental principles of life, the key elements of where we based our lives on, that is, in the past centuries, it has been guided by different instruments, and these instruments are all gone. Now children are so connected to every aspect of the world, but they cannot connect it to their fundamental
inner calling.
Yes, their essence. And they need to develop this more, because if you are balanced in in your basic fundamental principles, then you can make a choice in what to listen to and what to ignore.
That's exactly. It's beautiful how you say, because the workshop we are planning on the 28th of May will be around the systemic education and also the mindfulness as a basis for them. And the mindfulness in this context, as we talk, for me, opens up opportunity and all kinds of different kind of mindfulness-based or awareness-based practices, the opportunity for both the teacher and the student to really get in touch and stay in touch with this deeper essence. And then the understanding the larger world and offering these insights in a dialogic space, hopefully creates a safer environment for them.
So the emphasis on the curriculum and on the learning of the curriculum and the content that needs to be taught, this emphasis is not working anymore. We need to emphasize more on the balance of the human being that needs a lot of knowledge that can be offered by a curriculum, but the essence is the balance of the human being as an individual, as a part of a team, a part of the group, and as a part of the world of this planet. So for me, that is the huge paradigm shift that we need to arrange in education. But because that is connected to everything, it also needs to be connected to what adults do in their professional organizations and work.
You know, Ed Shane recently, in the past 10 years, talks about humble inquiry, humble consultancy, and his focus is mostly with organizations. But actually, what we have been talking about now is very similar to, we might call it humble education and humble learning, so that from an educator's point of view, this necessary humbleness is important, so that I don't overwhelm the children with a lot of content of what I think or we think as a collective is important, because who knows, back to the unpredictability, and also for the students to realize that in their learning process, back to your value-based learning, in their learning process, they have to feel and sense and understand that the world is also a lot larger, and their service helps to make them co-creators in this world they live in, rather than they have to either victimize themselves or aim for controlling the world.
And the interesting thing is that children are already system thinkers when they enter school.
Yes, that's true. Especially in the early ages. I know you work with children at the age of 5 or 6. You start your work with them.
Yes.
And I believe you have fantastic experiences. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
On the other hand, I want to share with you that you were here in Hungary by our invitation in 2006, I think, 5 and 6. And you remember later on we developed a shared project. But the main thing is that I never forget our conversation after a 2-day program. You said, how come that these Hungarians are so easy in picking up on your work? And I said to you, because I believe our language is a dynamic system-based language.
That's
and every aspect.
Insight.
And I look forward to talking to you about that, because since then I have more and more understanding of that. So talking about epigenetics, I think language is a major epigenetical context. So I am hopeful for our time together.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Guus.
Yes, you're welcome.